Imagine for a moment that you are an elderly woman enjoying your retirement. You head to your local Goodwill and are thumbing through the discount record bin looking to pick up some new music. Your eye is drawn to an album that looks like this. 20 jazz funk greats? That sounds like an interesting compilation. You think to yourself, these folks look friendly and there's some beautiful, peaceful scenery here. I think I'll take this one home and give it a listen. And you do exactly that. The album starts out and you think, okay, this is nice, but pretty soon it starts to get weird. The instruments distort and a sort of darkness starts to bubble up, and by the second track it's entirely ambient. You start to think to yourself, this isn't jazz funk at all, as it starts to sound more like a soundscape to an experimental horror film. The album goes on, getting stranger and stranger, getting under your skin and creeping you out. By the time you're hearing lyrics like this, soil patty, white patties, cool patties, water patties, by the cow. The elderly lady version of you is freaked out and saying, what in God's name is this? This was the goal of Throbbing Gristle in titling and presenting the album in this way. A practical joke on the unsuspecting people who had no idea what kind of whackness they were in for when they decided to pick up a jazz funk compilation. It gives you a great idea as to the type of avant-garde and mischievous energy that TG bring to the table. That lovely, seemingly serene album art is Misdirection at its finest, but it also holds a clue to the darkness within. The location featured in this photo shoot wasn't just chosen for its aesthetic appeal. The location in question is Beachy Head, a cliffside in England that is known as a suicide hotspot. In fact, it is the third most popular, if popular is the right word, spot for committing suicide in the entire world, just behind Japan's suicide forest. That connotation is unlikely to be picked up on by any unsuspecting retiree looking to check out some jazz funk music, but it adds an incredible undercurrent of meaning to the album art, which directly serves the actual musical intent of the album. There's also an alternate version of this cover that includes a dead body on the ground in the flowers by their feet. I think that speaks for itself. Less subtle, more direct. Throbbing Gristle was an experimental music group that could be categorized as an industrial band. Except the industrial genre didn't exist yet. Something this abjectly strange, uncomfortable, and counterculture hadn't really been seen in the music world before Throbbing Gristle formed in the mid-70s. They established their own record label called Industrial Music, and thus the genre was born. Beyond music, the group were also pioneers in the realms of performance art and experimental visual media as well. Before they were Throbbing Gristle, the musical group, they were first members of COUM, or C-O-U-M Transmissions, which is an art collective. They were dark, transgressive, and cutting-edge in multiple art forms. Groundbreaking is putting it mildly. The first Throbbing Gristle song I ever heard was Greasy Spoon. It was a 9.5-minute soundscape of terror that immediately commanded my full attention. It sounded unlike anything I had ever heard outside of the most creative and experimental horror movie soundtracks, and I needed more. If you've been around this channel for a while, then you know that I'm a massive horror fan, so it should count for a lot when I say that Throbbing Gristle makes the most consistently and effectively disturbing music I've ever heard. It's an uncomfortable assault on the ears. It manages to unnerve me like nothing else, and I love it. Their song Hamburger Lady is the single most disturbing song in existence, as far as I'm aware.
Hamburger lady, hamburger lady. It's like she's burned from the waist up, she's burned from the waist up, she's got no arm, her ears burned off and her nose, her eyelashes and her fingers are burned, she can't hold anything, and the medical advances, there's no end in sight,
I actually snuck a little reference to Hamburger Lady into my horror novel South of the Mason-Dixon. I don't know if any readers have picked up on that reference at this point, since it's pretty subtle and also rather obscure, but it's in there. By the way, if you want to read my book for yourself, just check the description for a link to learn more. The core members of Throbbing Gristle were Peter Christopherson, who would eventually become half of Coil, Cozy Fanny Tootie, who you might be familiar with from Chris and Cozy, Chris Carter, the other half of Chris and Cozy, and the band's de facto figurehead, Genesis P-Orridge. Throbbing Gristle was the direct inspiration for more prominent industrial bands like Skinny Puppy and what is by far the most mainstream industrial band, 9 Inch Nails.
These young students just moved in, 20 years old. Roxanne, who's named after Sting's song. Imagine how embarrassing that is. And of course they go, well, what do you do? Oh, I do some music. Oh really, what kind? Well, we used to have a band that we used to call what we did industrial music. And her boyfriend goes, oh really? And he goes, and he's got 9 Inch Nails tattooed there. And we said, well, not quite like that. And he goes, Marilyn Manson? No, not really. But we didn't see the point of trying to explain it to him. But that happens a lot. That people think that that's when it began. Which is a shame, but that's the result of the United States in media. If it's not on VH1 or MTV, then it didn't happen.
I'm going to focus in now on Genesis P-Orridge, who is a fascinating individual. For P-Orridge, everything artistic was as much about self-expression as it was about pushing the boundaries, defying societal standards, and challenging the public's perception. When it came to religion, P-Orridge was vocally against the Catholic Church, which I'm on board with, and instead they practiced what they called industrial paganism, and was deeply into the occult as well, which informed their music, especially in their follow-up band, Psychic TV. That band directly encouraged its fan base to participate in occult activities. Some of it's, tongue-in-cheek. In addition to being a pioneering artist and musician, P-Orridge is also an important trans icon who refused to abide by society's gender norms beginning as far back as the 1960s, and is one of the oldest examples I've seen of a celebrity identifying as non-binary and using gender-neutral pronouns, namely they, we in plural, and she with a slash between the S and the H.
I really liked the idea of breaking the archetypes and confronting people's expectation. And I think it's almost the psychotherapy of society to refuse its archetypes and stereotypes and challenge them. I'm much more likely to be attacked for having green fingernails if I'm dressed as a man than if I'm dressed as a woman. But violence is always there. Every time I leave the house in an exotic form, I have to make the decision to possibly deal with violence. And that is a very radicalizing experience. And it builds a very deep need to make sure you know who and what you are.
There was also the Pandrogyny Project, which was a series of extensive surgeries and body modifications undertaken by P-Orridge and their partner Lady Jane Breyer, designed to make them look like the same person, and in their eyes become one person. It was a fascinating artistic and personal expression that P-Orridge described as being not about gender, but about the ending of all binary perception. Quote, "For us, it's about erasing the need to even consider gender." And another quote, "It was about love. It was about becoming each other. It was about two individual beings reuniting into one unified divine being." P-Orridge's impact on the burgeoning LGBTQIA+ matters over the changing times is perhaps a bit unsung, but is likely immeasurable. P-Orridge sadly passed away recently in 2020 of leukemia. P-Orridge continued performing all the way to the end. In an interview with Art News shortly before passing, P-Orridge said they knew there wasn't much time left, and they were pretty much at peace with what was coming. Here's a quote: "Being alive is fascinating, having senses is wonderful, but I know I can't stay forever." Their passing away was described not as death, but as dropping the body by those close to them. Their memoir, titled Non-Binary, was published the following year. If Throbbing Gristle and/or Genesis P-Orridge were unfamiliar to you before this video, then consider checking out some of their work. It is decidedly not for everyone by design, so your mileage may vary. But for me, they're easily one of the most interesting bands I've ever encountered. You can subscribe to Brickwall Pictures if you feel like it, if you want to see more stuff I put together. I usually talk movies, not music, so this was a little bit off the beaten path, but I did also do another music-centric video on the new wave band Suburban Lawns and the disappearance of frontwoman Sue Tissue, so you might be interested in checking that one out next, who knows. So I'll see you in the next video. So long for now.